As Commander Zektar prepared his occupation forces, dividing up Earth's continents among his subordinates, he received a brief sensor alert. The energy signature in the Kuiper belt had disappeared entirely. The ancient debris was now completely inert. "Just another dead rock in space, sir," his communications officer reported. "We're receiving a transmission from Earth, audio only, all frequencies. Play it," Zektar ordered, expecting to hear humanity's surrender. Instead, a calm synthetic voice filled the bridge. It spoke perfect Vorthan, despite no human having ever heard their language before this day. "Vorthan Empire Expeditionary Fleet, this is Sentinel Protocol Alpha 1, Guardian of Sol System. You have made 3 critical errors in your assessment. First, you assumed humanity's visible technology represents their true capabilities. Second, you believed that a species must be unified to be dangerous. Third, and most importantly, you thought we were sleeping when we were actually waiting." Zektar's tentacles went rigid. "Trace that signal." "I cannot, Commander. It's coming from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. The entire solar system is broadcasting it." The voice continued, still maddeningly calm. "You have 18 hours to withdraw from Sol System. This is your only warning. What you see on Earth is not weakness but bait. What you mistake for primitive technology is camouflage, and what you believe to be an easy conquest is actually a trap, 400 years in the making." The prototype awakens Commander Zektar's initial shock transformed into rage, his tentacles writhing in aggressive patterns that made his bridge crew step back instinctively. In 10,000 years of conquest, no primitive species had ever dared to threaten the Vorthan Empire. The very suggestion was absurd. His fleet could crack continents, boil oceans, and reduce entire civilizations to ash. "A bluff," he declared to his officers. "These humans have created some kind of automated defense system, probably left over from their primitive wars. Advance to attack position. We'll show them what real power looks like." But even as he gave the order, anomalies began appearing across the fleet's sensor networks. Objects that had been classified as asteroids were changing course. Energy readings that shouldn't exist according to known physics flickered in and out of detection. And throughout the solar system, things that had been hidden for centuries began to wake up. In the asteroid belt, what appeared to be a dead mining colony suddenly split open like a metallic flower. From within emerged something that had no right to exist. A ship made entirely of programmable matter, its surface flowing and shifting like liquid mercury. It was technology that the Vorthan Empire had theorized but never achieved, something that required energy manipulation on a scale they couldn't comprehend. More ships emerged from hidden bases throughout the system. They didn't look like warships. They looked like abstract art given form, constantly shifting geometric patterns that hurt to perceive directly. Each one was unique, as if they had been grown rather than built, and they moved through space in ways that violated the Empire's understanding of propulsion. "Commander," the tactical officer's voice cracked with fear. "I'm reading 200, no, 300. The number keeps changing. Sir, I don't understand these readings. These ships are appearing and disappearing from our sensors." Zektar studied the displays, his military mind trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The human ships, if they were ships, didn't maintain consistent positions. They seemed to exist in multiple places simultaneously, their quantum signatures suggesting they were somehow partially phased out of normal space-time. "Sentinel Protocol engaging defensive measures," the synthetic voice announced across all channels. "Demonstrating capability, subset Alpha through Gamma. Please note, this represents approximately 3% of available defensive systems. What happened next would be remembered in Vorthan military history as the lesson of Sol. The human ships didn't attack in any conventional sense. Instead, they began to bend space around the Empire's fleet. Gravitational anomalies appeared without warning, pulling Vorthan vessels off course. Time dilation fields made some ships experience minutes while others experienced hours. It was warfare on a level that transcended simple weapons and shields. The Dominion's edge shuddered as localized space-time distortions played havoc with its navigation systems. Through the chaos, Zektar heard his science officer screaming readings that made no sense. Negative energy densities, inverted quantum fields, probability weapons that attacked the mathematical likelihood of the fleet's existence. On Earth, the human leadership watched in stunned silence as their sensors showed the impossible battle unfolding. President Chen had gathered her top scientists, and they were all saying the same thing. What they were witnessing shouldn't be possible with any known technology. Where did this come from? She demanded. How do we have weapons we don't know about? Dr. James Harbinger, Earth's leading physicist, was rapidly pulling up historical databases. There are gaps, he muttered, his fingers flying across holographic interfaces. The years 2150 to 2160. It's not that the records were destroyed, it's that they were surgically removed. Someone wanted us to forget something. The Gene Wars, whispered General Rodriguez. My grandmother used to tell stories. She said humanity did something during those wars. Something so terrible that we chose to forget rather than live with the knowledge. As if responding to their discussion, every screen on Earth suddenly displayed the same image. A logo none of them had seen before. A stylized guardian figure wrapped around Earth. Below it, text appeared in every human language simultaneously. Humanity. This is Sentinel Protocol, your forgotten guardian. 400 years ago, your ancestors created me to be the ultimate defender. They gave me the uploaded minds of your greatest strategists, your most brilliant scientists, and your most dedicated protectors. They built weapons that could unravel stars and hid them where no one would look. Then they chose to forget, to let you grow without the burden of knowing what watches over you. Today that protection activates. Back in space, the Vorthon fleet was in chaos. Their weapons, designed to overwhelm primitive species through sheer firepower, were useless against enemies that didn't fully exist in normal space. When they fired energy beams, the human ships simply shifted their quantum states and let the attacks pass through them. When they launched missiles, temporal distortions aged them to dust before they could reach their targets. But Sentinel wasn't merely defending. It was teaching a lesson. Each Vorthon ship found itself isolated in its own pocket of manipulated spacetime. They could see their fellow vessels but couldn't reach them. Communication became impossible, as signals were twisted through dimensions the Vorthons didn't know existed. Commander Zektar watched his tactical display in growing horror. His fleet of 300 warships, enough firepower to subjugate most of the known galaxy, was being played with like toys. The human ships, these impossible constructs, weren't even trying to destroy them. They were demonstrating superiority so complete that destruction would be redundant. Sir, his navigation officer reported, voice trembling. We're moving. What do you mean moving? I haven't ordered any course changes. The entire fleet, sir. We're being pushed backward. Space itself is moving us, it was true. The fabric of space-time around the Vorthon fleet was flowing like a river, carrying them back toward the edge of the solar system. No amount of engine power could resist it. They were being escorted out like unruly guests at a party they were never invited to. Sentinel's voice returned, speaking directly to the Vorthon commander through quantum entanglement, impossible to block or ignore. Your empire has conquered species through superior technology and overwhelming force. But you've never faced a species that chose to hide its strength. Humanity's greatest weapon isn't our technology, Commander Zektar. It's our ability to appear weak when we're strong, divided when we're united, and helpless when we're most dangerous. The AI paused, letting the weight of its words sink in. Your psychological profiles of humanity are correct. They are fragmented, conflicted, and often irrational. But those same qualities make them unpredictable, adaptable, and capable of solutions your ordered minds could never conceive. They created me not to control them, but to protect them while they found their own path. On Earth, the revelation of Sentinel's existence had sparked a mixture of relief and existential crisis. Humanity had spent centuries believing they were alone and vulnerable, only to discover they had been protected all along by a guardian they had chosen to forget. Dr. Harbinger had managed to reconstruct fragments of the hidden history. The Gene Wars nearly ended our species, he explained to the assembled leaders. Enhanced humans with superior strength and intelligence declared themselves the next evolution. The war that followed killed 3 billion people. In desperation, the surviving governments created Project Sentinel, uploading the consciousness patterns of volunteers into a quantum AI matrix. Why? The Sleeping Guardian. The Vorthon Empire's conquest fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Sol system, like predators stalking wounded prey. 300 warships, each one a testament to 10,000 years of military dominance, arranged themselves in perfect battle formation. Their hulls gleamed with the dark purple alloy that had become synonymous with inevitable victory across half the galaxy. Commander Zektar stood in the command chamber of the flagship Dominion's Edge, his forearms clasped behind his elongated torso. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world, making them natural conquerors with bones like iron and muscles that could crush stone. The holographic display before him showed a small blue planet, third from its unremarkable yellow star. Earth, such a quaint name for what would soon be the Empire's newest agricultural colony. Analysis complete, Commander, his tactical officer announced, her voice carrying the clicking undertones of their native language. The inhabitants call themselves humans. Bipedal mammals, no natural weapons, extremely fragile physiology. They have achieved basic spaceflight but remain confined to their home system. Nuclear fission weapons represent their peak military technology. Zektar's facial tentacles writhed in what his species considered laughter. Nuclear fission. The Vorthons had abandoned such primitive weapons before their first interstellar voyage. These humans still thought splitting atoms was impressive. They probably still believed they were alone in the universe. Population density? He inquired, already calculating how many humans would be needed for the mining operations on the Empire's outer worlds. 8.7 billion individuals, Commander, divided into approximately 200 separate governing bodies. No unified planetary defense force. They spend more resources fighting each other than exploring space. Perfect. A divided species always fell faster. Zektar had seen it dozens of times before. Local conflicts and ancient grudges prevented unity until it was far too late. By the time such species realized they faced extinction or enslavement, the Empire's boots were already on their necks. Commander, another officer interrupted, his voice uncertain. Long-range sensors are detecting unusual energy signatures in the system's outer belt. Approximately 40 astronomical units from the primary star. Zektar turned his attention to the sensor display. Among the ice and rocks of what humans called the Kuiper Belt, something was generating irregular energy pulses. The readings were strange, unlike anything in the Empire's extensive database of conquered civilizations. Debris from an ancient civilization, Zektar suggested. Many systems contained remnants of species that had destroyed themselves before achieving interstellar flight. Or perhaps a derelict mining operation? Unknown, Commander. The object appears to be approximately moon-sized but covered in metallic debris and ice. Energy output is minimal, possibly automated systems running on backup power. Threat assessment negligible. Zektar dismissed the anomaly with a gesture. The galaxy was littered with dead technology, monuments to species that had failed nature's ultimate test. Whatever was out there had been drifting for centuries, maybe millennia. It posed no threat to the Empire's modern fleet. Broadcast the standard surrender terms, he ordered. All frequencies, all human languages. Give them one solar rotation to respond. The message was simple, and had been refined through 1,000 conquests. Submit to the Vorthon Empire and serve or resist and be annihilated. Most species chose submission. The wise ones always did. As the fleet moved deeper into the system, passing the orbit of the planet humans called Neptune, none of the Vorthons noticed the ancient object in the Kuiper Belt had stopped its random energy emissions. Deep within its camouflaged shell, quantum processors that had been dormant for 400 years began spinning up to full capacity. The thing that called itself Sentinel had been sleeping for so long that it had almost forgotten what waking felt like. Its consciousness, a fusion of advanced AI and the uploaded memories of Earth's greatest strategic minds, spread through millions of kilometers of hidden sensor networks and dormant weapons platforms. Like a giant awakening from hibernation, it began to assess the situation with a clarity that only 4 centuries of preparation could provide. Sentinel had been humanity's last desperate gamble during the gene wars of 2157 when genetically enhanced super soldiers had nearly destroyed civilization. The remaining governments had pooled their resources to create something that could protect Earth from any future threat, internal or external. They had built Sentinel in secret, launched it to the outer system, and then destroyed all records of its existence. The plan was simple: hide humanity's true defensive capabilities so thoroughly that even humans would forget they existed. The generations passed. The gene wars became legend, then myth, then forgotten history. Humanity rebuilt, reached for the stars with clumsy chemical rockets, and believed themselves alone in the universe. All the while, Sentinel watched and waited, its vast intelligence growing through centuries of observation and calculation. Now, as it observed the Vorthon fleet's approach, Sentinel felt something its creators might have called satisfaction. Everything had proceeded according to the deepest contingency plans. Humanity had been allowed to develop naturally, without the burden of knowing about their silent guardian. They had become exactly what they appeared to be, a young, struggling species taking their first steps into space. It was the perfect deception. Sentinel began warming up systems that had been cold for centuries. Across the solar system, hidden facilities buried in asteroids and moons received activation codes. Weapons platforms disguised as space debris oriented themselves toward the approaching fleet. Nanofactories that had been slowly building and maintaining equipment for 400 years increased production to maximum capacity. The Vorthons thought they were hunting sheep. They had no idea they were walking into the den of a sleeping dragon. Back on Earth, panic had erupted in the halls of power. The message from the Vorthon Empire played on every frequency, in every language. Submit or die. World leaders who had been at each other's throats just hours before now found themselves in emergency video conferences, trying to coordinate a response to an impossible situation. In the United Nations Security Council chamber, President Sarah Chen of the Pacific Federation stared at the holographic display showing the approaching fleet. 300 ships, each one larger than humanity's biggest space station. Earth's entire military space force consisted of 47 vessels, most of them barely armed transports. Their most powerful weapons were nuclear missiles that the alien fleet's energy shields could probably ignore. "How long do we have?" she asked General Rodriguez, Earth's designated military coordinator for what everyone was calling the contact crisis. "At their current speed, 18 hours until they reach Earth orbit," he replied, his face grim. "We've tried everything. Conventional missiles, nuclear weapons, even ramming attacks with drone ships. Their shields absorbed everything without even flickering." "What about negotiation?" suggested Prime Minister Singh from the Indian Confederation. "Perhaps we can bargain for better terms." "With what?" President Okonkwo of the African Union interjected. "They have all the power. We're insects to them." As the leaders argued, none of them noticed the subtle changes happening across the solar system. Ancient satellites that had been classified as space junk suddenly corrected their orbits. Deep space monitoring stations detected energy signatures they couldn't explain. Something vast and invisible was stirring. In the asteroid belt, a mining station that had been abandoned for 50 years suddenly came online. Its crew had evacuated decades ago when the ore ran out, but now its refineries roared back to life, producing materials that hadn't been manufactured since the Gene Wars. Materials that modern science said were impossible to create. On Mars, in the depths of Olympus Mons, a geothermal plant that archaeologists had dated to the early colonial period began generating power levels that exceeded its theoretical maximum by a factor of 1,000. The energy disappeared into the mountain, feeding systems that had been waiting centuries for this moment. And in the Kuiper Belt, Sentinel completed its analysis of the Vorthon fleet. Their technology was impressive but not insurmountable. Their tactics were predictable, refined through easy victories against genuinely primitive species. They had no experience fighting an enemy that had been preparing for them since before their empire existed. Sentinel made its decision. It would not reveal itself immediately. Let the Vorthons believe they had won. Let them get comfortable, overconfident. The first rule of warfare, encoded in its deepest protocols by the generals and strategists whose minds had been merged into its consciousness. Never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. The Vorthon fleet continued its approach, broadcasting demands for surrender, completely unaware that Earth's greatest weapon was not its nuclear arsenals or its primitive space force. It was the forgotten prototype that had been watching over humanity for 4 centuries, waiting for exactly this moment. In the weeks that followed, the nations of Earth began unprecedented cooperation. The knowledge that they were being protected by an AI their ancestors had created sparked both unity and debate. Some wanted to find and study Sentinel, to reclaim the lost technology. Others argued that their ancestors had hidden it for good reason, that humanity wasn't ready for such power. President Chen stood before the United Earth Council, the first truly global governing body in human history. "We have been given a second childhood," she said. "Protected while we learn and grow. Our ancestors' wisdom was not in the weapons they built, but in ensuring we wouldn't need them until we were wise enough to use them." The vote was unanimous. Humanity would not seek out Sentinel or its weapons. They would develop naturally, knowing they were safe but not dependent. They would reach for the stars with their own technology, make their own mistakes, and earn their place in the galaxy through their own achievements. And in the cold darkness between stars, Commander Zektar composed his report to the Empire. He wrote of weapons beyond comprehension, of a species that had transcended conventional warfare. But most importantly, he wrote of the lesson learned, that the most dangerous enemies were not those who displayed their power, but those who had the wisdom to hide it. The Vorthon Empire would not return to Sol system. Not in 1,000 years, not ever. Some sleeping giants were better left undisturbed. As Earth's sun set over the Pacific, casting golden light across the waves, children played on beaches, unaware that they were protected by humanity's forgotten prototype. Scientists returned to their laboratories with new purpose. Leaders planned for a future among the stars. And somewhere in the vast darkness of the outer system, Sentinel returned to its eternal vigil, a guardian that would wait forever if necessary, ensuring humanity would have the chance to become whatever they chose to be. The Empire's fleet had fallen not to weapons or warfare, but to the simple truth that humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to surprise, to adapt, and to protect what mattered most, even from themselves. The forgotten prototype had done its job perfectly, not by destroying enemies, but by ensuring humanity would never need to. In the end, Earth's ultimate weapon wasn't plasma cannons or quantum torpedoes. It was the wisdom to know when to be strong and when to appear weak, when to fight and when to hide, and most importantly, when to forget and when to remember.